Hey everybody, I'm the Bat Otter, and I'm here with something different today. Everybody knows the story of Batman Hush. Everybody knows the story. Batman beats Hush. That's the story. And like I said, I'm kind of in a drought of videos because I don't have anything new to review, and I don't really even the comics that I do like. I'm like, I don't really want to review them. But it's been a while since I've looked at Hush. This thing has seen more deployments, more damage than a Vietnam War vet. But I was looking at it the other day because this is what got me into comics. This is what got me into drawing for the most part, and has led me to study people like Leonardo da Vinci. This led to this. Can you imagine? So the reason that it was like that is because Jim Lee's art was so mesmerizing and hypnotizing to me when I got this way back in high school. And so for days, I would take it to school. I would just stare at it. Like I would be at home. It would be 2 in the morning, and I would just be up, and I'd be staring at like, I don't know, just for instance, I'd be staring at like this panel right here. That not exactly, but I would sit there and I would stare at this panel for like 10 minutes, or maybe I'd stare at where's a less dynamic panel so that way I could really rub in the point. Man, it's always when you want to look for something that you can't find it, right? But I mean, any of these panels, right? I would sit here and stare at the splash page for 10 minutes, 20 minutes at a time, where I would be looking at every single crosshatch mark that Jim Lee made on Batman, or the way that the cape is flowing, or every tiny little scratch. I would look at Croc's face and realize that he only had one eye, and how twisted and contorted he is. I would see Catwoman in the background. I would practically memorize every crack and crevice in the buildings and the silhouettes. I mean, this one, let's see, which one is it? This page here, I know this thing like the back of my hand. Here's the back of my hand. You guys can memorize it too. And I've always not had a problem, but I've always wondered what was going through Lee's head whenever he shaded this bicep, because this is a common way to shade biceps whenever they're pulled back. Everybody's seen it. But what always got my attention with this one is how out of place it looks, because the sudden change between 1 and 0, aka black and white, essentially, always kind of got to me, and I always wondered. I'm like, why did he do that? And that's pretty much how my nights would go. I didn't have a lot of comic books. This was like my first one, so again, I would just stare at every single little page, every little detail, everything. I would just go through the thought process. I would try to pick at why in the world Jim Lee would illustrate anything like that. So I'm not going to review the book, but I am going to give my 2 cents on the artwork, because that's exactly what I know best. The story it's a comic book story. I know that some have said that it's overrated. Some have said, oh, it's the best story of all time. Me personally, it's not my favorite Batman story. I think that it was an excuse to get Jim Lee to illustrate every single Batman villain there is. We all know the 3-page spread villain cover here. I think it was 3 pages, where it has just every villain, Batman lying on a grave. And I mean, these are epic shots. Every hero here. I don't always like the way that he would have such heavy shadows on the characters, but I understood why. Whenever you're illustrating a 3-page spread with this much detail on it, down to the angels carved into the background, the churches, stuff like that. When you have that much detail, you're gonna have to cut some corners, especially whenever you're running on deadline. So it makes sense that he would put so heavy shadows on the characters. It's all in the. You guys just witnessed history. What did I tell you guys? This thing has seen so many battles. I think I just ripped out more pages. But I've never done that before. Man. Anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to break down some of the artwork, kind of give you guys a peek into the head of Jim Lee. I've watched every available interview with Jim Lee online talking about his artwork. I've watched a lot of his Twitch streams. I absorbed so much information. I'm like a little sponge when it comes to that. You know how sponges, they could just suck everything up. That's my brain essentially with these. So one of the things that I appreciate in comics, and pretty much what gets me into comics, is good artwork. That's the number one draw. The story could suck, and I'm gonna buy it because the artwork is just incredible. Uh, so I usually buy books based on artwork, not so much on story. I have all of Jim Lee's books as well. And one of the things that I remember Jim Lee talking about in a lot of the interviews surrounding Hush was whenever he drew Gotham City, which there are plenty of instances of that around Hush, obviously. He drew it as like a character in itself, as a living, breathing kind of entity. And I always took that to heart whenever I would try to illustrate Gotham City at the time. Obviously, I was younger, I wasn't so good. But I would still try to take those lessons. I noted the smokestacks. You guys see all the smoke, the haze through the city. Let's see. Let's get some better shots of the city. Here are the flagpoles. I mean, this, to me, I don't know why, but it reminds me of the main street in Philadelphia for whatever reason. The flags at the side. Never been to Philly, just seen the pictures online, so it's a weird connection. And then, of course, let's see, where's the top-down shot that I was looking at? And here, right? So you have the smokestacks, the air conditioners. You have this grimy kind of underground of the city, these chain link fences, trash littering the ground. And then, of course, you have all these homeless that play a part because Batman falls over. And it just looks characteristically Gotham City, right? And you kind of wonder why. Like, whenever you have some good artwork, whenever you have something that's really, really good... Let me take the pages that I tore out. They're kind of getting annoying. Hold that there. Oh, man, I ripped out 2 pages. Where was it? Right. You always got to wonder why. And so, the good thing is, this book answers why. So let's see. There's a shot of Batman having surgery on him. Vicky Vale is reporting from outside. And it's right here, right? What an incredible shot, first of all. It's not only about the way that you illustrate the city, it's about the way you illustrate the individual shots, the composition of the page, the dynamic illustrations. And as you can see here, Jim Lee took the composition into account. The thought bubbles are here. You have this twist. You have this off angle. We're looking at it vertically, but you have to twist it this way if you want to look at it from the proper angle. All of these choices, all of these designs, they're all taken into account, which is another thing that makes Lee such a great artist. And so that's why I want to focus so heavily on the city. This one, not so much, but you still see the smokestacks. You see that it's a little bit rough around the edges, I guess is the best way to put it. Some more smokestacks here. And note all of the points on top of the buildings. Lots of radio towers. Even, let me get to the Nightwing cover. I had it bookmarked. Bricks as well. All of those things, all those subtleties, the blimps are always a trademark of Gotham, the spotlights, stuff like that. But once again, smokestacks, antenna, radio towers, smokestacks, water towers as well. You'll notice those all over the place. The air conditioned units, the Gothic architecture as well, integrated into the city. And you're like, okay, you're going on and on and on and on. I get it. What's the point? Well, I'll show you the point. As you all know, Batman goes to Metropolis in this book, fights Superman. They have a little bit of a scrap. But look at Metropolis real quick. Where is he? Oh, it's not there. So here's an establishing shot of Metropolis, and I believe that it's a similar shot to what we're going to see later in the Nightwing issue of Gotham City. Let me get that on the ready real quick. You guys like that close-up of the hand? So here is a big establishing shot of Gotham City. So, oh man, you guys love my camera work. Notice one thing right off the bat with Metropolis, compared to what I've just shown you all of Gotham City. Cities are different, we all know that. Or, realistically, lots of cities look the same, but you can tell the difference between Chicago and New York City, right? So, in a comic book, it's fantasized reality. It's not real, right? So the cities should reflect the characters, just as Gotham City. Oh, hey, look at one of the ripped out pages. I'll use that later. Just as Gotham City should look very rough around the edges, very tough, very kind of grimy. Well, what's Superman associated with, right? He's he's like the perfect person. He's Superman, right? There's not much explanation you need more than that. So right off the bat, notice the buildings. They're flatter. They're much more streamlined. They have more glass. They look more modern, I guess you could say. There's not as much heavy emphasis on detail on the individual buildings as opposed to the skyline as a whole. It looks like a metropolis. If you look at some of the old pulp illustrations of metropolises, futuristic cities, that's kind of what this looks like. It doesn't look exactly like it, but it has the same ideas. The buildings are flat top. They're much smoother around the edges. They're more modern. Let me get some more shots of Batman and Catwoman on the train. All in all, you just don't see the same things. Like I said, the glass. And so in the same story, he illustrates two cities that are drastically different. Many artists in comic books, especially the ones now, I'm not going to name any names until I name the names, they just don't have it. You know, their cities just look like cities. It's like, oh, that's definitely a city, but is that Gotham City? Is that, Metropolis? What city is it? You can't tell because they don't put that extra effort in. They don't put the living, breathing mechanics of a character in. You get plenty more shots of them here, and like I said, note the glass, note the softer, rounder edges in Metropolis. There's no smokestacks whatsoever. Have you seen a single brick in a Metropolis tower? Have you seen even any advanced architecture like you would see here? In these buildings, you see a lot more nitty-gritty details on these because it's more apartment buildings. It's more like low-end housing, stuff like that, right? Radio towers. Again, what radio towers do you see in Metropolis? You don't. You simply don't. Why? Because you don't need to, because it's Metropolis. It needs to look like this. And by the way, have you seen a blimp? You haven't. So, you guys kind of see what I'm getting at here? The way that with such subtleties, I mean, you would never think about that. No laying bricks. Oh, well, you don't see it. You don't notice it. I'm sure that you've never noticed it, even if you've read this book, that there are no bricks on any of the buildings in Metropolis, whereas in Gotham there are plenty and plenty of bricks that you can see scattered along the walls. Again, look at the Gothic architecture of Gotham once again. You see these carvings into the sides of the buildings. There's a beautiful, beautiful shot whenever Batman is facing fake Jason Todd, Clayface, later in the story. Let me get there. You guys doing good? I hope you guys are doing great. This isn't a live stream, but comment that you're feeling great. They're fighting by this church, and I think this is a real church that Jim Lee referenced to draw here. It's further in than I thought. The book is always longer than I expected to be. Here it is. I mean, come on. You could stare at this forever. First of all, the perspective. Had this been a much simpler design, the perspective would have been much less difficult to achieve. But whenever you're dealing with all these intricate and precise patterns and details, perspective can get a little bit tricky. All the while you have a very proper anatomy Batman here. Don't even get me started on the way that he illustrates clothing items to be separate. As you can see, all these folds in a jacket, you see pretty much skin-tight clothing here, but it's more silky, it's more like cotton, right? You can kind of see the folds, but then his gloves are leather, so you see those folds better, and there are much more highlights on the leather gloves, whereas here, you can still see a lot of the masses illustrated, which is another point that you need to understand whenever you're drawing characters. You can't just draw the individual anatomy, you have to learn how to draw the masses. So whenever you have something like silk, it is cotton, it is skin tight, right? But at the same time, it's not so tight that you can see every single individual muscle fiber like you'd see here. You can't see every single vein. Now, that differs style to style. I'm just pointing out on this one. So while you do have very precise anatomy, you also have a little bit more heavy shadows, right? You don't see all 5 of the deltoids in the shoulder. You don't see the exact outline of the bicep. You don't always see the two biceps illustrated differently. Although there are times in some of the covers that Jim made the odd and, to me, uncharacteristic, he doesn't do it very often, choice of... He made some odd bicep choices in this story from the very beginning page. Anyway, let me get back onto the buildings. But yeah, it's a completely separate building. You would never see something like this in Metropolis. You might see a church. You might not even see a church in Metropolis just because of the way it's illustrated. And notice how it's always raining at Gotham City as well. Again, pointy towers, Gothic. You guys get what I'm saying? I could go on and on. So yeah, I mean, there's your art lesson of the day. The cities are living and breathing. And whenever you're creating something, even if it's these small details, like, again, the bricks, the smokestacks, the blimps, the antenna, the radio towers. Again, how many of these things did you see in the Metropolis designs? All of those tiny, tiny decisions, whenever you add them up over the course of one book, they make all that impact, and you don't even notice it whenever you're reading it. You just know, oh, hey, that's Gotham City, that's Metropolis. That's all you think. And it just fits the characters. You don't think, oh, that's just a city, right? Whenever you can identify the cities and differentiate in the same book, and there's that heavy contrast, that's when you know you've got it. So, I hope you guys learned something from this. I'm not the most organized person in the world. I ramble a lot, but once again, I just wanted to point out all those artwork features. I thought it would be interesting. See what you guys think of it. And I'll be back with some more videos sometime in the future.